This will be our demo problem from chapter 1. In your book, the directions are on page 23, and it's Michael Brown's business. The demo problem says Michael Brown opened his law office on June 1, and it has 2000, and then it has an X for that last number. Just fill in, this is 2015. During the first month of operations, Michael conducted the following transactions, A through I, and they're listed there. On the next page it says, requirements, step number 1. Record these transactions in the expanded accounting equation. And 2, prepare the financial statements at June 30th for Michael Brown, attorney at law. So we're going to do the expanded accounting equation for those transactions. Again, you can use your highlighter to expand where it says A, B, C, D, or to highlight where it says A, B, C, D, E. So you see the transaction, or you can do the total. Either one is fine. If you don't have a highlighter, that's fine too. It just makes it a little easier. Maybe I can make it a little bigger. It doesn't look like it's getting much bigger.
She's talking about the numbers.
First thing, chapter 1, we'll do this expanded accounting equation. Test 1, we're doing the expanded accounting equation. Chapter 2 and on, we'll never see this again. This is a tool, so I want you to be neat, and I want you to do a good job on it, but don't get hung up on being a perfect expanded accounting equation person. This is just a learning tool to help us decide, are we increasing or decreasing? We're not talking about debit or credit. We're using pluses and minuses, and I want to see the pluses and the minuses. If we decrease, put a minus. If we increase, put a plus. So let's look at the first one, A. Invested $6,000 in cash into the law practice. What accounts are affected?
Cash.
And what else?
The capital.
And the capital. What happened to cash? Was it a plus or a minus? A plus. What happened to capital? Was it a plus or a minus? A plus. I highlighted the total. It doesn't matter which one you highlight. I do have a pencil sharpener in here back by the printer if you need to sharpen your pencil. I think a mechanical pencil works better just because it always stays sharp. So we have a plus for the cash, and we have a plus for the M. Brown, comma, capital. Our balance is $6,000 for cash, and our balance is $6,000 for the capital. Now I might have you ask me the question, do we have to put the total? Do I have to put a 0 for each one of these? You can, if you want to. Remember, what did we say about leaving things blank in accounting? We shouldn't. So we could put 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 there. Are we in balance?
Yes.
So can we go to transaction B?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Can we also draw a line through it instead of a 0?
You could. That would be fine. Dylan just asked if he could draw a horizontal line through it. You could. And remember, we're not going to get hung up on this expanded accounting equation because we're never going to use it again. You need to do it on the test and do it on your homework, and that's all.
Are you going to require the dollar signs
Yes.
No, you don't need the dollar sign.
at all, not even to the balance?
The dollar, I'd put the dollar sign down here.
Okay.
I think it can get a little busy when you've got the dollar sign
Too
on
many.
each one of those numbers. This is unofficial. But down here, I would put the total. On your test, I don't give you these lines. So you have to remember to put those lines in to make sure that it equals. Let's go, do we have any other questions on A? Good questions. We ready to go?
Yes.
All right, so let's look at transaction B. Paid $600 for office equipment. What accounts are affected?
Cash and
Cash and
office equipment.
office equipment. What happened to cash, plus or minus?
Minus 600,
Okay, what happened to office equipment?
Plus
the
600.
plus 600.
Right. There's my minus, there's my plus, and there's my totals. I still have a seat up here at the front if you can't see back there, if you need to come up a little closer. There's also a seat over here. Are we still in balance?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
And I would check each one. When you're taking the test and you're not checking each transaction and you get all the way down here and something's not right, the test is timed and you're going back and you're trying to figure out which transaction is wrong, you're wasting time. So check it before you go to the next one. Transaction C. Oh, and I was going to say earlier, I noticed on your student objectives when you were filling that out, some of you have a very messy handwriting. You've got to be neat. If I can't read your numbers, maybe you can't read your numbers, and then your totals are going to be wrong. Some of you have a very large handwriting, and those little boxes are kind of small. So get a nice pencil, or if you're using a regular pencil, keep it sharpened because it's going to look real messy.
Are you referring to the workbook sheets?
Yes.
Okay.
These are small too. Okay. C, purchased additional office equipment on account, $1,000. What accounts are affected?
Office equipment and accounts payable.
Office equipment and accounts payable. What happened to office equipment? With a plus. What happened to accounts payable? A plus, wasn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I don't have all the other transactions on mine because I think it will make it a little easier for you to read it. But on the last page, I have all of them. I'm trying to make it a little bigger. Are we still in balance?
Yes.
We are, aren't we? Okay. Transaction D, received cash for performing legal services for clients. I hope I turned that on, did I? Did I turn on the camera?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. That's how my day's been. All right, D, what accounts are affected in transaction D? Cash and?
Plus 2,000 and then legal fees.
And the
plus
legal fees.
both pluses.
They're both pluses, aren't they?
Yes.
Okay. And then carry your totals down. Transaction E, paid salaries, $800. What accounts are affected?
Minus 800 on cash and
And expenses. Is the expenses a plus or a minus?
plus.
It's a plus. So put your plus sign in there. Bring your totals down. Transaction F, performed legal services for clients on account. What accounts would be affected?
Legal fees
Legal fees.
and accounts receivable because it's on account.
And it's on account. They're not giving us cash, but they're promising to pay us sometime in the future. So it's our accounts receivable and then our legal fees. And then bring your totals down. You should have a total in everything except for the withdrawals right now. Is it making it easier to use your highlighter if you have a highlighter?
Yes.
I think it does. And again, you can highlight either the transaction or the total. Either one is fine. G, paid rent, $1,200. What accounts are affected by that?
Expenses and cash.
Okay, expenses and our cash. What would that expense be called that we're using for that rent?
Rent expenses.
Rent expense. It's getting a little busy, isn't it? Minus for cash, and then a plus for our rent, or rent expense. We ready for H? Withdrew $500 from his law practice for personal use. What accounts are affected?
Cash withdrawal.
And the withdrawal. What if he had taken out of office equipment? Or supplies? That would be the asset, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Here it just said he was taking out cash, but the owner can take out anything from the business. So here's our minus 500 under cash. And then what happened to that withdrawal? It had 0. Now what does it have in it?
Plus 500
Plus 500.
on the contra capital.
Maria, when you logged into My Accounting Lab, what name did you use, your full name?
I think so, I think it did say my full name.
Okay, okay. And when you do your accounting tutor in here, make sure you put your last name in it.
Okay.
I didn't realize I had two Marias.
Okay, I haven't got to.
Okay. Put your totals in. I think we just have space for one more. And that's I received $500 from customers in partial payment for legal services performed. And it was transaction, what was it, transaction 6?
Yes.
What?
So it was really transaction F. It should have been labeled as F. Was the 6th one that we did.
So it's a cons.
So it is a plus on cash and a minus on our accounts receivable. What kind of transaction is that one?
Shift in asset.
A shift in assets. Now, how do we get that number at the bottom? And let's just make sure you have your totals. 5,400 under cash, 500 under accounts receivable, 1,600 under office equipment. When you add all of those up, and I hope you have your calculator, add them up in your calculator and see if you come up with the 7,500. And then on the right-hand side, we have accounts payable of 1,000 plus the capital of 6,000 minus the withdrawal of 500 plus the legal fees of 3,000 and minus the expenses of 2,000. Again, put those numbers in your calculator to see if you come up with the 7,500. This is the number that you'll have to write in on the test. On your homework, they give you those lines, but on your test, you've got to draw the lines on it. And then does the left-hand side equal the right-hand side?
Yes, ma'am.
Should be the 7,500. Now, in this form, this is not very useful. And we're going to find when we start pulling out the expenses, we're going to have to go back to the transaction to see which one was rent expense, which one was salary expense. That is why this is just a tool that we're using to learn whether it's increased or decreased. We won't live by this in accounting because it's a little bit too, it's not detailed enough for us. It'll help us do those next financial statements. Here's what yours should look like. Or, look how much better that looks. Can you find it? So you can decide on your test, when you're already nervous, do you want your highlighter? Because that's a little busy, isn't it? I'll make everybody dizzy by looking at that one or that one. And again, it can be your totals or it can be your transactions. Either one is fine. It's just a little bit easier for you to see it. What financial statement do we prepare first?
Income statement.
Okay. And this is just going to be a reminder of what goes on each one. The income statement has the ICE accounts. The statement of owner's equity gives us our new capital, and then our balance sheet. And I like the ALP, the assets, liability, and proprietorship. And we do them in that order. you should have an income statement, a statement of owner's equity, and a balance sheet in your packet, do you? Look at the heading for the first one. It's for the month ended June 30th. And how do we know that June has 30 days?
The knuckles.
Okay. Because what if I didn't give you the date? I just said the end of June. You'll have to know whether it's 30 or 31. The next one is the statement of owner's equity. And again, it has, this is for the month ended. And then the balance sheet is the only one that has the specific date. Now on your test, this part is worth 1 point. Every line is worth so many points. So make sure that you have your headings correct, because that would be 3 points off on your test. So what does the income statement show us?
A net income or net loss.
A net income or net loss. Based on the information from that expanded accounting equation, let's see if we can do, I've made it large so it doesn't fit exactly on the screen up here. It's Michael Brown, comma, attorney at law, income statement for the month ended June 30th, 2015. Let's put our revenue in first, and it goes over to the left margin. Revenue, colon. Indent just a little bit. And what was the name of our revenue account?
Legal fees.
Legal fees, wasn't it?
Yes.
Now, we don't have a chart of accounts. We only have that expanded accounting equation. So go back to that to see what the name was for that account. It was legal fees. And what was our total down at the bottom for legal fees?
$3,000.
$3,000. And I put a dollar sign beside that. This is where you kind of have to practice. This is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then the 3. Right? Sometimes you have to start backwards to know where that 3 needs to go. This is the hundreds, this is the cents, and this is the thousands. It's probably the first time you've written on a ledger page like that, isn't it? Where you've had to put numbers in. Unless you took a business math, and in the business math sometimes you do some forms like that. The next section is going to be our expenses, and we're going to call them operating expenses. And we'd have to go back through the transactions to see, what did we have? We had salaries and we had rent. Those were the only ones we had, wasn't it?
Do we skip a line between the legal fees and operating, or do we?
No, you don't have to. You can. I think you've got enough space there to do it if you want to, but you don't have to. The question was, should you skip a line there? You've got it indented, so you can see the difference there. It wouldn't be wrong if you skipped a line. Operating expenses, colon, and then I've indented salaries expense and rent expense. Now, all we had on that expanded accounting equation was our total, didn't we?
Expenses.
So we have to go back and look at which one was salaries and which one was rent expense. The rent expense was $1,200 and the salaries expense was $800. And I have a dollar sign on the first one, but notice I moved the dollar sign all the way over here. This is my line. Make it a straight line to indicate that I'm adding or subtracting, and here I'm adding, or am I going to subtract? I'm going to add. And I'm going to come down one line, and I'm going to put the total for that. You don't need to put the total here. You want the total to be over in this column. And we're going to call that total operating expenses. Now, if you're doing this demonstration problem with me, you have this to help you with your homework. Plus, there's also a perfect example of all three financial statements in your book. So use your book as a resource. I don't ask you to do anything for homework that I haven't given you an example of. So you have a good example. There's a line right here, and notice it's a straight line. I like straight lines. And what did we do here? Did we add or subtract?
Subtract.
We subtracted. Because this is our revenue, this is our expenses, and what do we have here? A net income, because revenue was greater than expenses. And we're going to label it net income, put your dollar sign, and give it a double line. Use your name tent, use your ruler, use the side of your calculator, something to give you that straight line. In accounting, neat is very important. When you start submitting your papers and you staple those together, I want you to act as if that's the financial reports that you're giving to your board of directors. How do those need to be stapled? In the upper left-hand corner, neatly. Not down in the middle of the paper so I can't get it open, but up in the upper left-hand corner. Neat is important in accounting. We want this to be neat. Would we always be doing this on paper like this?
No.
Paper and pencil? How are we eventually going to do this in the real world? With QuickBooks? Or with Excel?
On
Or with
via computer.
Peachtree?
Computer.
It's going to be computerized. But I've had several people tell me that they took the principles class and now they're coming back to take the intro class because they don't know what they did. They don't know what they did in that class. So we're going to do it paper and pencil. A friend of mine teaches over at UTSA in the accounting department. And she said, we've gone back to paper and pencil. We were doing it all on the computer. And students don't have any idea what they're doing. The computer does it for you, doesn't it? But unless you know what that computer's doing for the income statement, do we know where these numbers are coming from?
Yes.
Now we do, because we're doing it by paper. But if the computer does it for us, do we know what even goes on the income statement? It
No.
generates the form for us. We just say income statement. And that's the form we want. So when we're doing it paper and pencil, we will know why and the how. Do we have $1,000 here, everybody?
Yes.
Okay. So what's the second financial statement then that we do?
Statement of owner's equity.
Okay, the statement of owner's equity. And again, the heading is, if you can see it, Michael Brown, comma, attorney at law, statement of owner's equity for the month ended June 30th, 2014. Our first line is going to be Michael Brown Capital, June 1st. That was the initial investment, wasn't it? That's what we started with.
Yes.
That was that very first transaction. We did have a net income, didn't we?
Yes, ma'am.
And we had a withdrawal. We have a total for the withdrawal. So we can take the net income and subtract the withdrawal from that to still come up with what it's a net increase in the capital of $500. So our net income was how much?
1,000.
1,000, and that came from the income statement. Our withdrawals were 500, and again, there's a single line right here. We're subtracting. Here's the 500. The answer to this. We still had an increase in capital even though we had a withdrawal, didn't we?
Yes, ma'am.
It's too bad they made it the same number. It might have been better if it had been 600 and 400 so that you see the difference there. but we did have an increase of $500, and our ending capital for June is going to be $6,500. That ending figure for June will also be the beginning figure for July. Okay, the ending figure for June for capital will be the beginning figure for July. I think in your homework problems, I gave you one problem that has a net loss. So you would be subtracting the net loss from the beginning capital. The last financial statement that we're going to do is which one?
Balance sheet.
The balance sheet. Let's look at the heading on the balance sheet. It's Michael Brown, comma, attorney at law, balance sheet, and then it's the last day of the month on that date for the heading. The balance sheet, remember, is a snapshot of what the company looks like on a particular day. And it was June 30th, 2015. Now this one has some headings that, do your workbook pages already have the assets and the liabilities and the owner's equity written in?
Yes.
Okay, but on your test you have to write those in. Those are our headings for each side of the balance sheet. So we have assets. You might just circle those so you know you have to add those. The left side is going to be the assets, the right side the liabilities and the owner's equity. That's the accounting equation, isn't it? Up there at the top. Assets equals the liabilities plus owner's equity. Let's list the assets on the left. And what you can do is just not put this line in until we figure out this side, because we want these two lines to be on the same line. This one and this one. So we have our assets on the left. We had cash, we had accounts receivable, and office equipment. The assets are not listed in alphabetic order. They're listed by order of liquidity. How fast can we turn that to cash? Cash is the number one, isn't it, that we can turn immediately to cash? Accounts receivable, we could go to our customers and collect that money if we wanted to. And then office equipment, we could dispose of that and sell it to someone if we needed cash. Years ago, I worked at a hardware store in Virginia, and we got paid every Friday. On Friday, the owner of the company went out to collect accounts receivable so he could pay us.
Wow.
Oh. He had to go and make collections, so he had enough money to write the checks. You don't want to stay with a business very long that operates like that. But he could turn that into liquid cash by going to collect the money. So assets are listed in order of liquidity. And then we have a label there for total assets. And then on the right-hand side, we have our liabilities. So we had accounts payable. We had owner's equity, Michael Brown, comma, capital. And then our total liabilities and owner's equity. Again, there's a perfect picture of what that balance sheet looks like in your chapter pages 2. The dollar signs, we have an extra dollar sign on this side just because this is an item that kind of stands by itself. I don't like to see dollar signs on every number. Usually it's just the first number in a column and the total, or if it's a total right here. Could we have more than one capital here? If we'd had a partnership, we would, wouldn't we? Now, where did this number come from? Because the beginning capital was 6,000, wasn't it?
Off the statement of owner's equity.
I would put an asterisk beside this, and then I would put an asterisk on your statement of owner's equity, because when you're doing your homework, this is probably the item that will not balance. And you're going to be trying to figure out, why didn't that balance? It says it's $6,000 on that expanded accounting equation. How come I'm off $500? Well, this number is from the statement of owner's equity. That's why we do those financial statements in that order. Income statement to tell us whether we had a net income or a net loss. Statement of owner's equity to give us our ending capital, and then the balance sheet. What accounts go on the balance sheet? Out. Assets, liability, proprietorship. What accounts go on the income statement?
Income, cost, expense.
Income, cost, and expense. What's the accounting equation?
Assets equal liabilities.
Owner equity. Plus owner's equity.
Assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity. Accounting is the language of
Business.
business. Right? What's an example of an asset?
Anything that can be
Cash.
changed to
And
money.
it's anything of value, right? All right, we have just a couple minutes. Do we have any questions about chapter 1? Michael?
Well, is there any ways that we could find, like if we make an error, like one side is kind of different number than the other side, like what would be good ways to find?
On that expanded accounting equation,
Yeah.
I would balance it after each transaction. Make sure that if it's $500, you wrote $500 and not $50 on one side. That's probably the biggest mistake that you might have, just putting the wrong number down. And trying to add and subtract in your head. Don't trust this up here. Put it in your calculator. Add it up on your calculator, subtract it on your calculator. Don't trust the addition and subtraction in your head. Any other questions? What does debit mean?
Left side.
You can stay if you want to. You still have about 10 minutes. The accounting tutor is due when we take the test. So the accounting tutors for 1 and 2 will be due when we take the test for 1 and 2. And we said that was week 4. So you still have time. If you get here early on Tuesday, you might have time to do it. Or you can stay later today. Okay. Any other questions before we turn off the recorder, because the online students might have the same question? Oh, well, that's good. All right. We are finished for today, so if you had your computer on, you can go ahead and